In 1992, in a village in Thailand, American Tom, his daughter Stella, and his wife Duongpong spend the afternoon in the countryside. They talk about the origin of the universe, and while Tom takes a more scientific view of the subject, Duongpong believes in the origin according to his religion. Afterwards, the three of them take part in a village ritual in honor of Dan Hai, a powerful mystical entity. According to legend, humans invaded her kingdom and stole one of her rings, with Dan Hai punishing them with years of famine and drought. Since then, the villagers have performed this ritual as a way of asking the entity for forgiveness and bringing prosperity back to the village. Finally, Stella and her mother reach a sanctuary in the forest, when they hear a frightening roar, which seems to come from the statue of Dan Hai, made of raw meat. Nevertheless, the villagers just follow the ritual, and at the end of the day mother and daughter return home with Tom. On the way, Stella notices her uncle, Lamnoon, watching the forest intently, as if he knew where that roar came from. When night comes, Tom takes advantage of the fact that his wife and daughter are asleep and enters the forest, equipped with a kind of bracelet. He approaches the site of the shrine, where he sees pieces of meat scattered among the branches of the trees. Tom then encounters Dan Hai, a monstrous creature, who devours the meat statue and disappears into the darkness of the forest. Soon after, he hears a noise and looks around to find Stella, who had followed her father in hiding. Fortunately, she didn't see the creature and Tom says he'll take her back home, but first he needs to get something from the forest. As they walk for a while, they see a bright light in the distance and Tom leaves his daughter in a small hut nearby. Afterwards, he hands her a communicator and tells the girl that if he doesn't return soon, she should call for help using the code Bravo 123. The girl obeys and Tom heads towards the light, when his bracelet begins to react, causing a mysterious artifact protected by several rings to descend onto his hand. However, just as he was about to grab it, Dan Hai reappears and Tommy points his gun at her. The creature leaves, but the object begins to move away from Tom and emits a powerful beam of light, opening a gigantic portal in the sky. Stella runs to see if her father is all right, but there is no sign of him nearby, and seconds later, dozens of bodies begin to fall from the portal. Frightened, the girl goes back to the hut and sends out the emergency call, but when one of the bodies falls into the hut, she runs out of the forest towards the village. 31 years later, Stella now works in a museum and is giving a presentation to visitors about the solar system. However, because of a mistake made by her supervisor, the young woman is wrongly blamed and fired from her job. To make matters worse, she hasn't had a place to live since her divorce and keeps moving house, along with her young daughter called Valen. The two are having dinner at a diner when Stella receives a call from her cousin Ethi, telling her that Duongpong has been admitted to hospital. Worried about her mother, Stella decides to return to her old village and hitches a ride with Ethi, but the two cousins don't seem to get along very well. Along the way, Stella remembers the incident in the forest, and that the next day, she woke up in a bed next to Duongpong and Uncle Lamnoon. The girl tells him about the bodies in the forest and her father's disappearance, but her uncle says it was all just a dream. He also tells her that Tom abandoned his family and returned to the United States, but Stella always knew that wasn't true. Hours later, Stella arrives at the hospital and finds Duongpong, weakened by his condition. Nevertheless, she tells her daughter that she talked to Tom through the communicator and discovered that he had been transported to another world. Stella believes that her mother is just hallucinating because of her fever and lets her rest for a while in her room. Later, she meets Uncle Lamnoon and his son Kong again, and is surprised to see that neither of them seems to have aged in all this time. However, Lamnoon is more interested in buying the Duongpong estate as a way of helping the family with expenses. Ethi convinces Stella to sell, as he is interested in receiving the commission for the deal, and with no other choice, she accepts. Even so, Stella harbors a lot of resentment towards her cousin, because in the past he and other boys had tormented her because her father had abandoned the family. One day, Stella gets angry and starts fighting with one of the boys, but her cousin does nothing to help her. Since then, the two haven't spoken, and even though Ethi invited her to his house, Stella prefers to stay with Valen in her old home. At bedtime, she remembers what her mother said about talking to Tom on the communicator and decides to test it by calling the code Bravo 123. However, nothing happens and Stella goes to sleep with her daughter, until a voice is heard over the communicator. She recognizes the voice of her father, who sends a message asking her to take his bracelet and an object called Warp Ball to the Ramasun military camp. He also tells her about a machine called Taklee Genesis and gives her various coordinates, with Valen recording everything on her notepad. The next morning, Stella shows the recording to Duongpong and she says that she has received the same message all these years. Duongpong believes that Tom has ended up in the ghost dimension described in the legend of Dan Hai, where time passes more slowly than in the real world. The only way to save him is to find the warp ball, the artifact Tom found in the forest, and use it to trigger the Taklee Genesis machine hidden in Ramasun. Without hesitation, Stella sets off with Ethi and Valen to the forest, but first they have to recover the bracelet that is with Lamnoon. Arriving at his house, they go to talk to Kong, and Stella explains the whole situation to the young man, who at first refuses to help, afraid of what his father might do. But Stella insists, saying that she's noticed how he and Lamnoon haven't aged, and that this must have something to do with the bracelet. Finally, she asks for Kong's help once again to save her father, and when night comes, the young man decides to take the bracelet from Lamnoon. Kong takes advantage of the fact that his father is asleep and also takes his gun for safekeeping. With that, the group heads off into the forest and Stella goes to Don Hai's old sanctuary, where she finds the warp ball floating there, with its rings spinning around it. Putting the bracelet on her wrist, Stella manages to take the artifact, but just then, a mysterious woman appears in front of them. To the horror of the group, she transforms into Don Hai and tries to attack the trio, who rush back to the car. The creature gets closer and closer, so Kong pulls out his father's gun and fires, causing Don Hai to retreat. But the sound of the shot triggers strange memories from his past, where the young man sees himself falling from the sky, with a bullet hole in his body. As soon as Kong recovers from this vision, the group heads towards Ramasun's military academy and finds the Taklee Genesis machine underground. Stella then tries to talk to her father through the communicator and Tom responds happily, knowing that his daughter is fine. However, he soon discovers that 30 years have passed on Earth, while in the dimension where he is, only 30 minutes have passed. Tom then says that he was an undercover CIA agent who was sent to investigate the Taklee Genesis and find out what it was being used for. He discovered that the machine was created with the technology of the alien race that created the space station he was taken to. Now it will be necessary to use the warp ball to bring him back, with the mechanism being activated by the movement of the fingers of whoever is wearing the bracelet. The problem is that the warp ball needs its 5 control rings, but 2 of them were scattered when Tom was transported. One of them ended up in the year 5000 BC, in the city of Udon Hai, while the other was sent to the future of 2225. Despite this, Stella intends to save her father anyway and needs to hurry, as the special station only has 20 minutes of fuel left. So, with her mission group formed, Stella activates the warp ball and is sent to Udon Hai, more than 7,000 years in the past. Once there, the group ends up in a mountainous region, where a village lives nearby. However, on the opposite side, other villagers appear, who have somehow been infected by a pathogen and set off after the group, as if they were starving zombies. Stella and the others run towards the village, but are stopped by a force field around the place. This protection was created by one of the warp ball's rings, and thanks to this the group uses the artifact to open a rift in the portal and protect themselves from the zombie villagers. Although they don't understand their language, Ethi remembers that these are the ancient people of Ban Chang, who had mysteriously become extinct. It seems that the zombie attack was the cause, but history was changed thanks to the warp ball ring. Unfortunately for the village, Stella needs to collect the ring to make the machine work and bring her father back. Seeing that it will cause the destruction of countless lives, she refuses, but Kong takes the bracelet and when he triggers the warp ball, the ring reconstructs itself and joins the mechanism. As they feared, the force field is undone and the zombies set out to attack the village. In the midst of the confusion, Stella ends up separated from Valen, who is saved by one of the villagers, along with her young son called Morden. With the zombies biting and infecting the villagers, Ethi and Kong rush to flee the village and trigger the warp ball once again. Stella then rushes to take Valen with her, but the woman realizes too late that instead of the girl, she has brought Morden in her place. Stella screams for her daughter, but is taken with the rest of the group back to Ramasun's base. Desperate, she tries to activate the time travel to rescue her daughter, but she can't because as long as it's incomplete, the warp ball will only take them to the timeline where the rings are. Now that they have one of them, they need to find the other one in the future and Stella activates the mechanism to make the time travel. However, before she can do so, she is stopped by Lamnoon, who points a gun at her and tells her to return the bracelet. She refuses, but Lamnoon threatens to shoot her because another time travel will cause even more damage to the world. To prove his point, he leads the group out of the base, where they find the city completely destroyed. Because of this, Lamnoon orders them to hand over the bracelet, so that he can go back in time and put right what they've done. He even threatens to shoot Morden if they refuse, but in a surprise attack, Kong tries to disarm his father and orders the group to activate the warp ball. Ethi, Stella and Morden leave for the future, but first they hear Lamnoon's gun go off, indicating that one of them has been hit. Seconds later, the 3 of them end up in an abandoned factory, where they are surrounded by a group of young people holding futuristic weapons. They try to explain how they got there, but are knocked unconscious by the group and handcuffed. Minutes later, Stella and Ethy wake up and the leader of the group goes to talk to them, saying that they need her help to activate the Taklee Genesis. They tell her that years ago, in 2024, the city was attacked by a huge kaiju and the armed forces were unable to eliminate it. It was then that the American army decided to intervene and dropped a bomb on the area, causing the destruction of the monster, but also the end of Udon High. From its ashes, a new city was built under the name of New Udon. However, in the city's capital, a totalitarian government was established and all resources were taken from the people. To fight the government, this same group of young people joined together in a rebellion, but days later the city suffered another strange phenomenon. A huge explosion erupted from the sky, creating dimensional portals through which dinosaurs and other beasts came out. It was also through this that the second warp ring appeared, creating a force field around the old industry. Thanks to this, the group stayed young for many years and managed to set up their base, protected from attacks from the capital. While organizing for battle, they found out about the Taklee Genesis, and using reverse engineering, created a replica of the machine. Even so, they couldn't make it work, so they need Stella's bracelet and warp ball to change their future. After hearing everything, Stella and Ethy decide to help the rebel group, but their priority remains saving Valen. Meanwhile, in the present time, it is revealed that Lamnoon has been hit by the gun and Kong despairs, looking for a way to save his father. However, in his final moments, Ethy tells him that he is not his real father, but that he found him in the forest of Don High. In the 1960s, the American Army invaded the Ramasun Academy and used some of the residents to carry out tests with the Taklee Genesis. Lamnoon was one of those chosen, and there he met the young Lawan, with the two falling in love and planning to run away. One day, the two were taken for a test, but Lamnoon pretended to be ill and distracted the scientists, giving Lawan the chance to break free and steal the machine's bracelet. She then activated the warp ball, but the soldiers were taken together, and in the middle of the time travel, Lawan was hit by a shot. Lamnoon tried to help her and the two of them tried to use the warp ball again, but the machine collapsed, impacting all the timelines. It was thanks to this that the past, present and future were affected, creating enormous chaos throughout the timeline. Despite this, Lamnoon and Lawan managed to escape to the year 1969, but the young woman was affected by the process and turned into a monster, who would be known as Don High. From that day on, Lamnoon tried to find a way to save Lawan, which led him to create the village ritual to feed her during this time. It was also at this time that Lamnoon found Kong and saved his life, after he too had been transported by the temporal collapse. After revealing the truth, Lamnoon asks to be left in the forest, so that his end can be with Lawan. Kong obeys, and on learning the truth, he is ready to find out where he comes from and what his true past is. Back in the future, the rebel group decides to test the warp ball using one of the dinosaurs captured in a cage. By teaching the leader how to activate the machine, she manages to send the monster to another timeline and tries to bring it back. However, only its cage reappears, and seconds later the monster appears in the air, and for some reason, teleports to various places. Because of this, the creature attacks the members of the rebellion inside the base, while outside, the capital's army sees that the place is unprotected. They seize the chance and start launching torpedoes with poisonous gas, which quickly spreads throughout the site. While the rebels are trying to get in to warn the group, their leader is with Ethy and Stella trying to escape from the dinosaur. The creature prepares to attack, but more rebels appear behind it, ready to shoot. Stella then grabs the bracelet and triggers the warp ball, causing the dinosaur to freeze in midair and giving the rebels the chance to eliminate it with their weapons. They finally manage to get rid of one threat, but another arises when the rebels outside are being eliminated due to the poison gas. Stella thinks it best to take everyone to another timeline, but the group refuses, as this is the original time and they need to protect it. The group leader then suggests that they use Taklee Genesis so that Stella can return to her own time and undo the changes caused by time travel. She takes everyone to the laboratory, and through a hologram, she shows them the current state of the timeline, full of deviations due to the changes in time. If Stella can go back to the time before the machine was first used, she can prevent these changes and leave the timeline intact. As a result, the past will be maintained, but the future will be unknown, and it will be up to the humans themselves to define their own course. Stella agrees to do this, but Ethy decides to stay because he believes he can help the young people overcome the rebellion and fight for a noble cause. Stella is surprised by her cousin's attitude and embraces him, with the two of them finally reconciling their past grievances. Finally, the group gives her the last ring to rebuild the warp ball, and now she can travel to any year in time. In addition, the machine also shows the people who have ended up in different timelines, and Stella discovers where Valen is. Because of the time collapse, the girl and Morden's mother end up in the year 2024, the same day that the kaiju attacked the city. The two find themselves inside an office, but the villager starts to feel ill and Valen discovers that she has been bitten by one of the infected. Luckily, the girl finds some medicine and spreads it on the wound, managing to slow down the infection. However, an infected policeman suddenly appears, along with one of the villagers, who have also been transported to this timeline by the collapse. Fearing that her daughter is in danger, Stella activates the warp ball and sets off with Morden to the present time, where she meets Kong. The young man tells Lamnoon what happened and Stella mourns this loss, but she asks for his help to save Valen, who is in the year 2024. Kong agrees to help, but he takes the bracelet and triggers the time travel, but this time to the year 1976. When they get there, the three of them find themselves in a school in total chaos. According to Kong's memories, he was one of the students who was eliminated, and he soon meets up with his best friend again, trying to escape from the police and armed rioters. Kong, along with Stella and Morden, help the group of students escape, but in one of the corridors, they see the time collapse happen. With the entire timeline messed up, past and future begin to emerge, and for a moment, Stella sees Valen trying to hide from the infected. She then asks Kong to take them to the girl, but seconds later, the students are shot by the criminals and eliminated in front of the young man. Furious, Kong turns back time once again and tries to help his friends escape their tragic fate. However, the time collapse only gets worse, and suddenly a ship from the future, which was about to eliminate the rebel group, is transported to the past and explodes in front of the school. The explosion wipes out the students, while Kong's best friend is hit by a piece of shrapnel in his body. The young man then helps him escape, but they end up in an alley, where they are surrounded by the group of criminals. With nowhere to run, Kong returns the bracelet and warp ball to Stella, along with the camera his friend was using. The young man decides to stay in his timeline and help his colleagues face the invasion, while Stella takes the proof of the crimes committed against them. Stella then says goodbye to her friend and triggers the machine, ending up in 2024 together with Morden. However, as soon as she arrives in this timeline, she realizes that she has also been hit by the explosion and is seriously injured. Shortly afterwards, she finds Valen hiding in the office and is happy to be reunited with her daughter. Unfortunately, the villager wasn't as lucky, and while protecting the girl, she ended up being bitten by the two infected. From across the room, Morden hears his mother's voice, but when she emerges, she has already become a zombie and doesn't recognize her son. The boy cries when he sees his mother in that state, but there is nothing he can do and Stella triggers the warp ball, taking the young man with her to the present time. When they return to Ramasun, Stella tries to activate Taklee Genesis and follow the plan to correct the entire timeline. However, she becomes weaker and weaker as a result of her injury and asks Valen to do it for her. The girl then uses the communicator and asks her grandfather Tom to help her figure out how to activate the machine. Tragically, they won't be able to bring him back, but Tom doesn't mind and teaches his granddaughter how to activate Taklee Genesis and correct the timeline. Meanwhile, Don Hai appears inside the base and tries to attack the girl, but Morden grabs an iron bar and stands in front of her to protect her. Valen then follows her grandfather's instructions, and after placing the bracelet on the machine, she activates the Taklee Genesis. As she does so, a singularity in the shape of a black hole begins to suck up all the gaps in the timeline. On the verge of losing consciousness, Stella hears the voices of her parents talking to her, telling her that everything will be fine, and then she falls into a deep sleep. Sometime later, Stella is woken up by Valen, having returned to her original timeline. She is happy to see that her daughter is safe, as is Morden, who is welcomed as a new member of the family. Later, Stella visits her mother in hospital and tells her everything that happened. She regrets not having been able to bring her father back, but Duongpong is hopeful that one day they will meet again. A few days later, Stella decides to stay in her old village with Valen and Morden, who is adapting to the new reality. At that moment, Valen asks if they will meet his uncle Ethi again, but he is too far away in time, helping the rebels rebuild the world in the future. Despite this, Stella still has the bracelet and the warp ball, which she keeps in her father's old office. As she tinkers with the object, the young mother seems to have an idea of how to bring her loved ones back, but whether or not she has managed to do so is a mystery hidden in time. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.